As the Korean War broke out in 1950, the U.S. Air Force desperately needed a medium-sized bomber. As the issue became more pressing, they opted to adapt an existing foreign design, a gamble that hadn't been performed since World War I. The result was the Martin B-57, a Glenn L. Martin-built version of the English Electric Canberra. After arriving in Vietnam in late 1964, the B-57 bomber flew dozens of nighttime missions, dropping its payload from its unique revolving bomb bay door and attacking the Ho Chi Minh supply trail. Despite its relatively brief operational service, the B-57 Canberra will always hold the distinction of being the first jet bomber in U.S. military history to drop actual bombs during combat. A competition. In the early 1950s, the United States Air Force identified the need for a new all-weather medium jet that could combine the agility of a fighter with the capability of a bomber to drop its weaponry. The Americans considered adopting a foreign fighter to their needs, and the Air Force contacted the British government to demonstrate their newest jet-powered aircraft, the English Electric Canberra. A first-generation medium-sized bomber, the Canberra was developed by English Electric in the mid-1940s as a successor to the de Havilland Mosquito. On August 17, 1950, the flight demonstration was performed at the Royal Air Force Base in Burtonwood, England. For the next month, a team of American test pilots and aircraft engineers also visited the English Electric factory to test the jet and get a detailed technical assessment. The U.S. Air Force then issued a request for proposal for a jet-powered bomber with an all-weather capability, a top speed of 630 miles per hour, and a range of 1,150 miles. To expedite the development, only proposals based on already existing aircraft were considered, including foreign designs. The contenders included the Martin XB-51, the North American AJ Savage, and the B-45 Tornado, as well as the foreign Canadian Avro Canada CF-100 and the British Canberra. All of them would be submitted to a thorough evaluation process to determine the best option. On February 21, 1951, a Canberra broke the record to become the first jet aircraft to perform a non-stop, unrefueled flight across the Atlantic Ocean, traveling from England to Canada in only 4 hours, 37 minutes. 5 days later, a fly-off competition took place at Andrews Field in Maryland. Each of the competing aircraft was tasked with performing a series of maneuvers within a 10-minute window, demonstrating their agility and performance capability against its rivals. When the Canberra proved to be significantly superior to the other 4 competing aircraft, the U.S. Air Force proclaimed it the winner of the contest, marking the first time since World War I that an aircraft based on an overseas design would be manufactured in the United States. American Canberra. Despite the urgency, there were concerns about political opposition in using a foreign aircraft. Also, with English Electric working at full capacity, several officials were skeptical on whether its production schedule would meet the needs of the U.S. Air Force, and if replenishing spare parts would eventually become a problem. However, in March of 1951, English Electric secured a licensing deal with the American Glenn L. Martin Company to build the Canberra in the United States. By the end of the month, Martin received a contract from the U.S. Air Force to manufacture an initial 250 Canberras, designation B-57A. And in April, English Electric and Martin signed a formal agreement to cover the production of the British aircraft. Given the pressure to put the B-57A into combat, the initial manufacturing process Martin used was almost identical to the English Electric model, except for the placement of more powerful Wright J65 engines. Other minor differences included a crew reduction from 3 to 2, canopy and fuselage detailing, and the installation of wingtip fuel tanks. By the time the first US-built Canberra flew its maiden flight on July 20, 1953, the Korean War was 1 week away from ending. Only 8 Canberras were manufactured on that first production batch, and the remaining 67 were converted to reconnaissance aircraft, designated B-57A Canberra. Bomber model. Martin eventually developed a more detailed bomber variant to differentiate the American Canberra from its English counterpart. It was given the B-57B denomination. Because there were no time constraints this time, the model could incorporate previously recommended changes. The B-57B Canberra's cigar-shaped fuselage had broad elliptical wings that accommodated 8 50-caliber machine guns, had 4 20mm M39 cannons with 290 rounds each. The jet could carry up to 6,000 pounds of explosives inside its bomb bay, and another 4,000 pounds on its 4 wing racks. A low-drag rotary bomb door improved accuracy and faster attack speeds. The upgraded Canberra also included a toss bombing computer, allowing the crew to pull up, throw a nuclear bomb, and then circle away to escape the blast. Despite these promising developments, the design changes brought extensive delays to the American Canberra program and a substantial cost increase on the fixed-price contract. The definitive B-57B made its maiden flight on June 18, 1954, and suffered engine malfunctions like its predecessor. Several models were lost during testing due to a faulty tailplane actuator that forced the Canberras to dive directly into the ground. Consequently, the U.S. Air Force regarded the Martin B-57 Canberra as inadequate for night intruder operations, in which it would need to penetrate enemy airspace to disrupt and hinder their plans. In response, Martin put all its assembled bombers through a thorough avionics upgrade, but the U.S. involvement in Vietnam would delay the Canberra's retirement. Action in Vietnam. The first fleet of 20 B-57 bombers was set to arrive at the Bien Hoa Air Base near Saigon in August of 1964 to join the 8th and 13th Bomb Squadrons. This deployment would mark the first entry of jet combat aircraft in Vietnam. The arrival of the Martin B-57 bombers got off to an unfortunate start as the first 2 Canberras collided and blocked the runway, forcing the rest to land at the Tan Son Nhut Airport on the opposite side of Saigon. More B-57s departed from Clark Air Force Base, heading to Bien Hoa during the following weeks to make up for the losses and to reinforce the initial development. Eventually, so many Canberras arrived in Vietnam that some were sent back to Clark in the Philippines. The South Vietnamese Air Force also received their own B-57s, but the training process was unsuccessful. After Commander Major Wing Nhao Bien was run over by his own jet in a parking accident, the aircraft was returned to American service. The bombers were not initially cleared for combat missions and only performed unarmed reconnaissance flights. It would take about 6 months for the American Canberras to see fighting action. In November of 1964, Viet Cong squads attacked the Bien Hoa airport, destroying 5 aircraft and damaging many more. After several low-level sorties to demoralize the enemy, General William Westmoreland finally released a group of B-57s for a combat operation on February 19, 1965. The mission was to strike the Viet Cong guerrillas 30 miles east of Saigon. This operation marked the first time a bomb was dropped against an enemy by a U.S. Air Force jet bomber. The B-57s would cross North Vietnamese airspace for the first time 11 days later, when the jets participated in a series of interdiction strikes 25 miles north of the Vietnamese demilitarized zone. The operation became known as Rolling Thunder. In April of 1965, Canberra crews performed night interdiction strikes against North Vietnamese supply lines along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, while the 3rd Bomb Group performed nighttime attrition strikes near Da Nang. Dubbed the Night Intruders, the B-57s could hinder traffic flow using conventional bombs, as well as napalm, rocket pods, and incendiary cluster bombs. Their principal targets were trucks, storage areas, bridges, buildings, and anti-aircraft artillery sites. The Screaming Bird. On May 16, 1965, a B-57 awaiting takeoff orders exploded on the Bien Hoa airport runway, setting off a chain of secondary explosions. 10 B-57s, 1 F-8 Crusader, and 11 South Vietnam Air Force A-18 Sky Raiders were destroyed in the incident. The remaining B-57s were flown to Tan Son Nhut and continued flying low-level sorties while reinforcements arrived. Even the Air National Guard sent a few of their own B-57s to Vietnam. The 3rd Bomb Group was withdrawn from operations in October of 1966 because of the remaining B-57's combat attrition and the ever-increasing availability of higher performance fighters, like the North American F-100 Super Sabre. Still, B-57 night intruder missions continued until the fall of 1967. By January of 1968, the 13th Bomb Squadron was also deactivated. and by July of the following year, the 8th Bomb Squadron's strength was down to only 9 aircraft. The U.S. Air Force then decided it was time to retire the B-57 bomber from active service. Out of the 94 B-57 bombers deployed to the Vietnam War, 51 were lost, most of them due to enemy fire. The Canberra would ultimately fly more than 31,000 sorties in Vietnam and Laos between February of 1965 and October of 1969. However, there would be more variants of the American Canberra, which would be used as a weather reconnaissance aircraft with NASA and deployed to Afghanistan as airborne command posts. The Martin B-57 Canberra would be remembered as the Screaming Bird, because when a Vietnamese prisoner was shown the noisy jet's silhouette, he allegedly said, quote, "The Screaming Bird. It's the worst. It stays over the target so long, and it never runs out of bombs."